So I want to talk with everybody today about AI agents at GitLab, sort of a continuation of what we chatted about in our call yesterday, what's been going on in the UX agent Slack channel, and there's been some more fun developments in that over the night and the early morning that I can catch up on too. Um, so the three things I thought I'd cover, we'll see too if we have time. One, talking about what is an agent based on the understanding that I pulled from folks who've been working on this for a while, and also introduce you to a debate that's opened up just like the end of the yesterday. There's now like two diverging opinions that we'll have to work through. Show you ideas for agent catalog and creator, at least how I imagine this could work, depending on which definition we land on, and how the agents are in use. The agents in use story is the one that was from last week, so if you've seen that one already, that's why I put it last. So one of the things that became clear to me just yesterday was that actually the definition for an agent isn't just confused within folks, right? Like we saw that in Erica's research last week, right? But just across the industry, like there's a lot of contention around what is an agent. Um, Anthropic has a definition that I shared in the chat yesterday, but IBM has a very different one where it's very much about task oriented or outcomes based. Maybe folks are already familiar with it. I just read about it yesterday. Google DeepMind has one that's really particular to what they're trying to work on, but it's another often cited one. And LangChain, which is sort of one of the base technologies that we're working on using to power all this, is another one that's, I'll turn that on so we get more notifications. Yeah, so the what I've been drawing so far is sort of, and what Basti and Penny and the team have been working on for a while is more like what I'd say pretty closely aligned with these definitions of what an agent is and how it works. Um, they also have their own write-ups, but if you want something, I think these are a little bit easier to read at times. And then this is sort of this IBM one is sort of representative of the other definition that's sort of coming up in conversations this morning and last night of that Roger got by talking with Bill and with Heather about like leadership, basically of like outcome focused. A little bit different. So most of what I've drawn already, as you imagine, because it's late breaking, is sort of tied to the other definitions. I'll go over that first, but just wanted to give you the context of where that things are shifting or potentially shifting. So for all those drawings, it's a little bit of context, like what is an agent, right? It's defined, at least in my drawings, it's defined by a goal and guidelines, which are defined through like basically text prompts, right? Um, it'll have inputs, right? It has inputs of things it needs to know in order to achieve the goal as described through the prompts. It has tools and actions, which are the actions it's allowed to perform, either like specific actions within GitLab, but potentially external, right? Is this agent allowed to read my email or my calendar, right? For example. And all the guardrails, which we've talked about a lot, right? So the restrictions, what projects it's allowed to look at, what users are allowed to use it, what kind of resource limitations might it have. It's a long list. And then I'll open up the FigJam. Open up in a browser. It's okay. I'll just move it up there. All right. So in here, this is, I believe, tied to that first sort of those definitions I shared as well. Like, what is an agent? Maybe I'll start there. They have an agent catalog there, but at least the way my brain works, I like to look at the edit or create page, and that sort of tells me how everything's going to work. So here we have an agent, right? Agent has a name. It has some kind of description, just for the users to understand what it is. It has a model associated with it that could be changed and upgraded over time. It has a collection of tools, right? So again, this would be in most agent building systems out there. It also, I mean, particularly for any external systems you want to connect to, like calendar or email or something else, this would not only be actions, but also be like the handle the authentication tokens and secrets that are going to be required for that as well, where you could manage all that. But for each agent, it would be an allow list of specifically, which tools, which actions does this agent have access to? So that when an agent is, again, sitting down to think about how am I going to solve this problem? A user asked me to fix an issue, right? It's a free form goal entered by the user. These are the methods which I can attempt to solve the problem, right? I can use any of these tools in front of me, but no others. The prompts are there to provide it, again, some context for how it should interact with users, how it should try to solve the problem, right? These are the sort of text-based things like you are an agent, be polite and professional, right? Um, all those sort of things. Here I'm also exploring, I might be going beyond scope here, but exploring dividing prompts into inherited ones that are inherited from a larger system, and ones that are defined inside of an agent. When you're having this many objects, and like particularly if you're going to want every agent to say be polite and concise, right, and courteous or something, like I don't think you want to define that over and over and over again 100 times on a different lines of text somewhere. So the idea would be to define it one place and then import it into each one that you want it to apply to. Um, that's a concept here, but this is me going beyond the strict bounds of what I've seen written up in the scope. And similar with guardrails down here. You have different sort of constraints on how the agent is able to perform in addition to the tools, right? But it's going to be a sort of a grab bag of different ones. Like they might have API rate limit, or maybe they're allowed to use a certain tool, but then we want to have a block list in addition to the, so, if you import the actions from Google Calendar, which ones do we never want you to use no matter what, right? Have that in as well. And then things like, yeah, the token budgets, or what directories you can read, that sort of thing. You can see some of these are editable, some of these are not, like the global ones. This user wouldn't have permission to do this. You'd have to go somewhere else to edit global prompts and guardrails. But the agent-specific ones, this person would have access to manipulate. And then when you're done creating it or editing it, you can either publish the changes, which this isn't defined, but I think would probably end up compiling down into some sort of text file, something like YAML or JSON or something. So that way it could get merged through a merge request. We'd have versioning and everything, so we could still do rollback and recovery from anything. I don't think we want to necessarily build out a whole system from scratch for that. But I'll leave the engineers to work out the details on that. We need to have some method of previewing and testing, which is a huge thing, which I haven't cracked open yet. But in order to debug and test to make sure it works the way you more or less expect it to, that's a really important part. Save progress without publishing, another important aspect too. So particularly if I don't know, as people are revising or modifying all these other things, I want to make sure they can save that progress. And then all of that could be viewed through a view layer. This is definitely, I should mention too, none of this would be final UX or UI. This is just very much just trying to think out the objects and the properties here. And when I don't stop to think, I sort of fall into AWS console mode, if you can tell. This is sort of just those patterns I've used for years. But you have a view layer here where you can see all the information, right? Just compiled together. And then finally, you'd also have this catalog where you can actually access all this. So the catalog, to me, like the agents, there's agents inside, the agents live inside of agent catalog, which is where you manage everything about the agents, where you can view them, you can edit them, you can duplicate one and create a new one. I think that's kind of be the most popular option, probably, right? Rather than build one of these things from scratch, just take an existing one and fork it or clone it or something like that, right? To make a new copy. And then I think I'll pause there before I go any further. We can, how these are typically done. Do we do questions in the middle or questions at the end, Pedro?
We do at the end, so you still have
Okay,
time
all
to
right.
do the
All right, then I'll do a
presentation.
little
I
bit more.
think,
Okay,
yeah, at this point you have more or less 5 minutes left. So I would
cool.
suggest
Yeah, then
trying to be specific about what kind of feedback you need or ideas that you need or aspects that you like to see challenged by the team.
I see. Okay. Uh, in that case, I'll just go real quick through this. Yeah, so the other idea here is that you'd have a library of tools, right? That's another thing you'd have to manage. Again, they would all access one place where you can turn them off for everybody, on for everybody, see how they're being used. One place for all these prompts that are getting recycled and reused and all the different agents. So you can manage that in one place. guardrails. This would be sort of the maximum guardrails. The idea being that within agents, you could possibly narrow it in, but probably not go beyond. So like if you have like a API rate limit generally of 100 calls a minute in a particular agent, maybe you could narrow that down if you wanted to for this one agent, but you could never go beyond it. It's at the boundaries, at the maximums and the minimums. And then there'd be workflows. And this is a very hotly debated topic right now in those threads, but under this definition, a workflow is a like a pre-planned execution sequence of potentially agents doing things and not agents doing things, like just tools and agents mixed together. Um, where you'd have, this is a realistic-ish example I made down here, but you have potential multiple ways that a particular workflow could be triggered, right? Maybe somebody clicks something and a label is added, something is uploaded, could be any number of things, right? Including a duo chat interaction, but certainly not limited to. Some tool executions might happen, very deterministic things. Like for this one workflow, someone adds a particular label, always go validate the issue is actually has all the information that the agent will need to do anything, or is it like a blank issue, right? Like again, most of this is about mixing them up would be to um, uh, optimize for like your token spending and your latency, right? Like don't burn cycles on stuff it can't do. And then would be a mix of those things. Um, and then you have all these workflows, and the workflows would be very task oriented, right? Like whereas before the agents were modeled after people and capabilities, the workflows are very task oriented. This is a big difference between what is being debated right now too. If you're in that other thread, where what Roger's imagining is the agents are very task oriented, and zero, like basically each of these would be an agent is what he's imagining right now. So if you see that, that's a big difference. Um, and you'd also have this library of nodes, these like individuals, I'm calling each of these individual steps. All right, I'll pause there and focus it. What I'd like to get feedback on, I guess, is general clarity of the mental metaphors and large concepts here, right? Uh, does this, one of the things that you lose when you go really deep in the weeds on this, where I've been for weeks now, just thinking about this and reading about it constantly, is does this make sense outside of this bubble in my head that I've created, right? Um, so that's what the most of my feedback is around there, or any particular huge, you know, gaps or potential pitfalls that you see already just in what we've covered. And there I'll pause it and turn it over to the assembled design talent and UX
All
talent.
right. You still, if you want, you still have 2 minutes left, but if not, we can
Good.
move.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Andrew. I tried to capture things in the agenda as you were presenting.
Thank you.
And yeah, so we'll first go over the clarifications first. So anything that is unclear in the presentation before we move into like the feedback itself, so that we are all giving feedback on everything that we understand. So if there's anything that you didn't understand, which could actually be one of the things that you were just asking, like, do these concepts make sense, right? But we have the first question. I don't know who added this. Can you please verbalize?
Oh, sorry, that was me. Yeah.
Okay.
I had a meeting with David this Monday, uh, and he described something very similar. So I'm curious if this is the same source of where you're going with this, or are we having maybe different people working on the same idea? I'm just trying to, I guess, clarify the source of this because I didn't see an issue link.
Yeah, there's like 100 issues. There isn't an issue yet that describes any of this. This is born out of my mind and a lot of collaboration with Claude and about, I don't know, 40 or 50 documents that I've pulled together from Google Docs and different issues. I mean, there is an issue for workflows GA that's out there, but it's not super linked into the rest of the world. Um, if that's yeah, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, so I guess yeah, so I might end up having, I might collaborate closer with you on this then, because it looks like you're already doing a lot of the things I got assigned this week. So that's why I'm kind of want to make sure we're on the same page with an issue, or
Yeah,
I'm just a
I,
little not clear who's working on what.
who's right?
Erica?
Yes, I agree. If I could just address that real quick too. I don't know either exactly. My assumption would be, and I would be happy to debate this or talk about, but is that like what I'm trying to do, one of the roles I think I'm trying to serve is to connect all the dots everywhere, like at a high level. But as you can tell, probably just from this, there's an absolute ton of real estate to cover here, right? Um, so that one of the ways we could end up working is that I probably own, I don't know which pieces yet, like pieces of this. I might go all the way down to the weeds on, but I'm trying to also serve as the making sure all the pieces connect into one thing that fits together, I guess.
Okay, well, it look from everything I can tell, it looks very aligned with what David told me on Monday. So I guess
Yeah, this whole picture again is aligned with, as far as I can tell, the plan that has existed for months, and then there's like a wrinkle getting thrown in.
perfect.
Yeah, Erica, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. I'm like, ooh, ooh. Taylor, can you talk about your understanding of David's definition of agent and how that maps on to the different options? It would be great because you had that conversation. And it's not like he gets to be the final say, but I feel like it would be helpful if we really had a crisp understanding of what David's mental model of agents is.
Sure, I can try to dig up from my notes some of the links he had to specific presentations. In terms of, I think when I had the discussion, there was a lot about the catalog is a place for to work kind of like a marketplace for public, but being more public. So a way for sharing
Mm,
agents and kind of one-to-many scaling. So I think some of the analogies would be like OpenAI with their marketplace, but Google Model Garden, I believe it's called, was one. Um, but really trying to, with an emphasis on like sharing. So like these things will become kind of like the open source ethos. Um, and basically a company needs a way to create a catalog for all their agents that they create to share within their company, but then also these things can be shared outside the company as well in certain cases. So that's sort of the main thing that we were discussing. I will try to get
okay.
uh,
And did
the links in there. I'll have to dig them up, but
Okay. Do you have a sense of, like, if we think of those two definitions of agent as persona versus agent as task, do you have a instinct about which one he's mapping to?
I think it was more like it's a collection of agents that would be like trained on individual tasks or skills.
Okay.
Was how it was explained to me. But
Okay.
I will again try to find some of the presentation links.
Posting it too for, I posted a link to this in the chat, but this is one of the diagrams Roger drew last night, which also includes marketplace, but he has flagged it as red for launch. Just heads up, at least at the moment. Who knows? It's all variable, but and the idea of like and maybe having like community contributions and sharing and stuff, which I think is cool. But I heard about that, but only last night.
All right. Um, and yeah, so next, had a question about the nodes. If you could explain those a little bit.
The nodes, sure. Uh, yeah. So the workflow, this is even in here. I'm sort of pitching that I think this is way too complicated to build for V1, but we'll see. Um, unless again we just punt and I found like an open source one that works with our base and we could just take that and run with it maybe. It's less fun because it's already done. But um, yeah, but you'd have basically you could call them maybe they're not called nodes, maybe they could be called steps if that's easier to understand. But it'd be the things that get done in order, basically, right? So like in here, in this version that came out here, every box is a node, right? You'd have maybe a trigger, or you'd have something like you know, a scan where it's going to make sure, this one is going to make sure that there's enough information in the issue to, you know, be parsable by an agent. Then we'd have an agent node, which then looks through things and asks for human approval before it goes further. The human approves, so then it moves to the next node, which is to go actually just go pull files and put them in a big bundle somewhere, and then assemble the files that then Duo Patcher, which is the next node, is going to actually work on. And then finally, when you get to like push branch with MR, this is again, this doesn't have to be done by, you don't have to rely on an agent to guess that it should do this, right? Or ask it, please, when you know, you can actually just say, no, you're going to do this, right? You can, that cuts again, that makes it less brittle, makes it more predictable, and is going to save you some tokens in the end too, right? This is basically just a standard API call.
Yeah, that explains
That
it.
explains
Yeah,
it.
that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I
Yeah.
understood. Thanks,
And
Andrew.
then I don't know, this is this is why it'd be huge. Like building all this whole thing here is like building a visual IDE. It's a big job. If you want to click on this one, go watch some of their tutorials if you want. I did. It's awesome, but boy, there's a lot to it. Yeah. If we're gonna build something like that.
Okay. Any other clarifications? Anything that was unclear that anyone would like to ask before we move into the feedback section?
Just one quick one about the nodes. So you're thinking the nodes would also be like a shareable kind of library on its own as well?
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
This is me. This is just me. But yeah, I think again, I'm just imagining myself, right? Like if you don't have to, you could make this. Some of them do. If you look at some of the builders out there, you have to define it every time, and that just feels like such a huge pain in the rear, right? To like every single time have to like they have somewhere you can't even drop agents in from an agent library, right? Where like you build the agent as part of the flow every time. That just feels unwieldy in like an enterprise businessy environment if you're gonna have lots of these, right? Again, if we're gonna take a like sort of DRY approach to this, right? Like I think you need to have one place to define the things that you're going to be using constantly. Particularly if we have ideas of being like community driven, and I mean this huge app store or whatever. We can't call it app store, I'm sure, but whatever they call it, agent store of like all these agents. Like if you're going to have dozens, hundreds of agents, you've got to have a way to manage those from a central place. I feel like so, and that's where um, you know, early on I was really digging into like what are the pieces of an agent, and this is the thing that is also still getting debated. But because I think each of those is going to need a little catalog, right? I don't know if you need the whole marketplace with sharing. You know, I don't know about that, but I think you're going to want to have those bits defined in a place that you can manage. It gets actually way
Uh,
complicated now that I think about community stuff coming in from outside and other organizations. But yeah,
yeah, I can imagine it would be like authentic, like I don't know, even like a rating system of like, is this even a quality node that I'm bringing in if someone else built it, or
well, I'm just
like,
thinking about changes. This is the first thing that jumped in my mind. What's the SLA if I'm like using some community-driven thing and then am I forking it when I bring it in so I can control it? Or am I subscribing to it and just trusting that they won't change the logic of this agent to blow up my server one day after they get a lot of people subscribe to it, right? Anyway, fun stuff.
I did have one quick question. You probably can't answer this, but
Mhm.
tools and workflows, is a tool just a type of workflow? Because I think that's something that seems like potentially confusing to me here is I'm
Yeah.
using this node builder. I want to trigger a tool. To me, it's
hmm
just a short workflow. I don't know.
Yeah. So that's one of, yeah, it's, you know, a tool is functionally, right? It's an authorization token, right? And it's access to a particular API call, right? If it helps, right? It's you this agent has permission to execute this particular API call. Like you have read permission on my issues, something like that, right? That would be like one tool that you could access. Like you agent can read issues. Being able to edit issues, separate one. Be able to create issues, a separate one. If that makes sense, right? Like it's that's what they are. It's the methods that this agent is able to execute, right? Like what it's able to do in the world, either within GitLab or externally. Again, but that's one of the things that makes it very different from, say, just an LLM, right? Like an LLM, you can chat to, talk back and forth, text in, text out. But as soon as it's able to start, like, and this line gets blurred, right? Because if you use like ChatGPT or Claude, at times it just goes into agent, like small agentic mode on its own without like a big formal, like clear distinction. But like even just like doing a Google search is an agentic thing, right? Like if it goes and triggers a web search, that's an action it's now taking using like the Google API. But that's a tool use basically, right?
I did have one question before we went into the feedback session is how do we imagine this working in the GitLab architecture? Is it like, do you add all these agents at the top, like instance level and apply them to groups and projects? Are they
Yeah.
per group based? Like how, I'm just curious how you're imagining that portion of it.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm throwing a dart here by saying I think it should be instance level, or once we have organization level, I feel like it should be at the absolute highest level that a user has access to, because I I assume we want the agent to have full access to everything that customer has access to, right? That you don't want it artificially constrained down to only like this agent. I think you should like you define an agent globally and then restrict it to a certain project, sure. But the definition lives globally because then that same agent could be assigned to project A and project B, right? There's no reason you'd want to have to again, don't repeat yourself. They wouldn't have to like rebuild the exact same agent. I want to behave in the same way just for a different project. But also, if people in project A have, they use tabs instead of spaces for their code, sure, then we make a variant. We take the take the one thing, duplicate it, and add one more rule to it or something like that. One more guideline for how it should format its code.
Yeah, I think that was similar to what I was thinking. I think we'll have to do, because right now on .com, the highest level is group, but I think with like organizations coming in and some of this other stuff, we'll have to figure out some of that. But I agree that I saw this more as like the high level, and then you could tailor how it affects your groups
Yeah,
and projects going down. So that's in line
yeah.
with me.
Like it's something I didn't call out, but I imagine that as a kind of guardrail. But that's actually something I didn't get all the way to it, but like in a new version I'm working on here, I was actually breaking it out into like which projects that one can access, which users, like basically taking all those instead of making it one giant table, breaking it into smaller tables. Something I'm thinking about to make it more clear.
All right. Let's move into the feedback session. So to reiterate, the main point where Andrew wants feedback is just the general concepts and metaphors if they make sense. Andrew, I also added in the feedback needed or aspects to challenge section some of the questions you had in the Fig Jam, but let me know if you want to go through these as well. If not, we can just focus
Sure.
on the general concepts and metaphors. And with that, Erica, you have the first point of feedback.
Yeah, I just thought it might be good to point out that I think there's going to be different actors who are consuming the agents versus those that are kind of building them. Like we know from the
Yeah.
Rail list, yeah. So we're designing here for the people building them.
These screens here that I was talking about today are for the agent builders within a customer organization. I'm assuming this is going to be like a person or a small select group of people who know or care enough to manage all this, right? Like the person who wants to ensure that, again, probably like from a security perspective, right, that things are being handled correctly. Yeah, it'd be a different story, which I have, but we didn't talk about today, about how they would get used by users. And I think you saw that before. This doesn't conflict with what I drew before in my head. This is just the other half of it, where I first drew out, uh, what it looks like when people are using it. Again, really like focusing on the idea that these are like you treat them like users, basically. You give, they create artifacts within GitLab just like users do, like just scattered all over. But there's also specialized views where you can view a detailed log of what this user did for this this agent did during its one execution, or this workflow did for its one execution.
Yeah, and I'll just share one more thing. And I see Pedro saying great work, so I should say great work. Sorry, I'm
Oh
just
no, it's fine.
jumping in with the questions. But I think because I feel that the users will be kind of confused by all the prompt detailing you have there.
I
Uh,
think maybe two. Yeah.
but I think if we bifurcate it in that way, then
Yeah. Yeah. Where I'm thinking about going next. It's good to hear this. Is to have Yeah, is to sort of call it something like, instructions or something. I think the model, I think the naming is wrong, right? Um, and possibly also have breaking out goal into its own special prompt from everything else. That seems to be a pattern I've picked up since I made these drawings. It's just yesterday, looking around. Yeah.
Yeah, to that point, I definitely like sometimes I get technical writing like in on this really early on to just kind of brainstorm on different ways things are worded, different terminology. So that could be another suggestion if you're going back and forth between things. I
Yeah.
think John has been helping. I don't know exactly because the AI
Okay.
space has been moving around, but that could be someone who'd also be good to get feedback from.
Who is, I'm not sure I've met John. What's his last name? Just in case there's more than one John at GitLab.
John
Yeah,
Glassman.
John Glassman.
Okay,
I
I've
thanks.
added his
also
name to the agenda.
Thanks, I see
perfect.
it there.
Yeah, he's great.
Cool.
Yeah, just great work. I think the visuals are important to understand, how the concepts are related. I think, for this audience, it maybe could be simpler, but I think for other people, it's important to have this. And as you know, like maybe many of the things could be, thrown away in the future, but I
Yeah.
think it's really important that we have something to look at, some kind of artifact. So I really appreciate the time you put into it. Um, and yeah, I want to go back to the notes. I think
Mhm.
in general, we should be thinking about everything being like componentizable or in a library kind of,
Yeah.
scenario. And let me know if I understood the nodes correctly and how they're applied. So can we think of nodes and like looking at this specific example, which is, more or less, logical, but it's an example.
Mhm.
Um, could we think of the nodes in a library as in a specific configurations of a trigger or a tool or an agent? Because the tools might already have some predetermined configuration. The agents might already have some
Mhm.
predetermined configurations, but I'm
Yeah.
imagining that if I'm creating that fix issue workflow, I'm going to add the agent, I'm going to add the tool, I'm going to add the triggers,
Yeah.
and they will come with some pre-configurations, but I might have to tweak one thing here and there within the workflow itself.
Mhm.
If, for example, I wanted to have, fix issue um, version A, fix issue version B, for example. And so I would be able to save that specific configuration of the dual planner agent or that specific configuration of a tool to use later. Is that it? Is it more a more
Yeah. So you're talking
granular
about,
level of
yeah,
specification?
yeah. So I've thought about that too. I didn't go as deep into this because as soon as I started I spent a couple hours like, uh, learning about how they worked, like ones like this worked. And I have a strong opinion that this is too much to build uh, this fast.
No, no, yeah, yeah.
But I hear you. But
Yeah,
what I'm
feasibility,
thinking
yeah.
about, yes, so far I think we're on the same page. Yes, that this was, so that's why one of the reasons why it's relatively light in here. But I wanted to get something up there. Yeah, so this would be a library of nodes, like you said. Like there would, like each of these blocks could be here. Now, whether or not, depends on scale, right? Like if we have 300 agents, maybe you don't want 300 agents loaded into a panel over there. You have one agent block with, then in there you
Right.
pick which agent loads into it, right?
Exactly.
But largely, yeah, like this would be, so whether or not there's one trigger, that'd be different ways. You could say there's one trigger block you drag into there, and then you configure the trigger block to what kind of trigger or the node,
Right.
right? Um, Maybe there's one agent block I drag in and then decide which agent is acting inside there.
I wonder, yeah, now that
Yeah,
sorry, I was just thinking about the paradigm that we've already experienced in, like for example, Figma with the libraries, the Figma libraries, and
yeah.
you have a component. Let's imagine like a button component.
Mhm.
In this world, the button component would be an agent, right? And inside the button component or the agent component, you would have variants. So you could create just one variant
Oh, I
or
see.
multiple variants.
I
And
hadn't thought of
maybe
that yet. Yeah.
and maybe when you're creating this workflow, like you're in this fixed issue and
Mhm.
you add the planner agent, I don't know what it is, you
Sure.
figure out that, oh, actually here I need this specific configuration of the planner agent, and you write out the configuration,
Yeah.
and now you can say, oh, actually I want to promote this specific
Hmm.
configuration to be a variant of the planner
That's
agent.
cool. That's a cool. Yeah, I had thought about customization at this level, but it had not at the level of like DRY and componentizing it. Um, but the idea being that when you have a, like you've got one of the agents picked and you see some in here, you can tweak maybe some stuff about it, right? Like
Yeah,
maybe for this, you're going to have to define the inputs. Maybe for this one workflow, it might be different from
yeah,
another one, or whether or not it needs human review is a thing you can toggle on and off, right? Or if you want to give it an additional prompt or guideline, right, or whatever, or you want to tweak some of that stuff. Like in this one instance, I know normally I tell you to do this, but here I actually need you to do one other thing, right?
yeah,
I thought about that, but again, sure, if that becomes a thing people do and they do it a lot, you're not going to want to have to redo it every time. So it makes sense that you might
yeah,
want to
yeah.
capture that into like a node specific variant or like yeah, like maybe variant or something like that. Like take an
Yeah, yeah.
agent and a node variant or something like when applied to a node, here are some
Yeah,
different
yeah, yeah.
presets or templates of how to load it
Because
in.
that's usually what we end up doing, in our design systems. We have one base
Yeah.
button
Yeah.
or two, and then we start seeing people, oh, now I have to change the
Hmm.
button to always have the disabled state. So I'm always overriding the styles to have the disable
Yep.
until someone says, oh no, we're actually going to promote this
Yeah.
into its own variant. So now there's a button disabled variant. So I can
Absolutely.
see that working
Hmm.
here for all kinds of nodes, triggers, agents,
Yeah. That it should
tools,
be
right?
components all the way down, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the way down to the lowest level. Yeah.
But yeah,
Makes
yeah,
sense.
food for thought. But
Yeah, I like it.
overall, I think that this makes sense to me. Just the notes part yeah, is not, linking so much to the rest, but I think with this conversation, maybe it could be a good direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, Emily, I wanted to make sure you had some time to give feedback, especially about, Andrew's main question about the general concepts and metaphors, if they make sense.
Yeah, I think this in general is following kind of what I was thinking for. Like, I didn't look too much into an agent catalog, but this kind of covered a lot of those top themes I was thinking into. I think one thing we're still trying to figure out, and Andrew and I have talked about this too, is like what are the default ones GitLab's going to offer? How are we going to craft
Yeah.
those, and how are we going to edit those or allow editing to those journeys? The one question I did have about the nodes, though, is if we do the componentize of them.
Mhm.
Is there also the option to, if you have kind of like a node set, if you go back and edit that node, that applies to everything? Or like, how does that work? Because I know sometimes in
Yeah.
Figma, you go back, something's changed in the design system, you edit it, it applies across all files.
Mhm.
Is that something we also wanted to bring in there if they found a better way for this kind of node to
Yeah.
do things, that it then just applies across everything once it's edited? Or um, is that a risk? That was something that
Yeah,
came
I
up.
mean, the way
Yeah.
the way I solved this was I punted, right? There's a reason the edit button's not here because I had the same thought, right? I
Yeah.
was like, not editable. There, solve the problem. But yeah, my thought here was actually the checkboxes should be gone too. Um, that this was primarily a like much like yeah, this was primarily going to be like a library that was GitLab defined and owned and operated, right? But I hear you. Yeah, if we're gonna make, especially if we do this, what Pedro was talking about with like components and like custom, like then yeah, this gets more complex. Um, because you have to be able to communicate if you're getting at like the impact, like the blast radius of making a change, right? Like which I was alluding to a little bit, like how often these are actually getting used, like whatever. But like
Yeah,
that's what the idea of like showing the number of workflows and like so how many things are they applied to, and then how often are they being run? Because maybe it's only one workflow, but it's super popular. Um, but yeah, that would be a if I hear you right, that would be a big deal of if you were to start allowing people to change these, and especially if we do community and third party stuff, which again just feels like super down the line to me. The more I think about it, even over these last couple of minutes.
Yeah. It almost seems to me like the first iteration of this should not be editable and we should
Yeah.
gradually bring the edits in just to
Right.
see what the impact of those might be. Because yeah, I could see it potentially being great, but potentially affecting a lot of workflows that people weren't expecting it to affect. So being cautious with how we introduce something like that.
I mean, that may be the case for a lot of the stuff I'm putting in here too. I may already be biting off more than we need to chew, right? Like we could just let people howl and yell the fact
That's
that
good.
they have to redefine everything over and over again. Like that's a fallback position in my mind, right? It's like, yeah, if we need to, all right, then everything is defined in an agent and there is no tools library, there is no prompts
Yeah.
library, there's no guardrails library, and they just have to define it every time and then just manage that all in their head. And then maybe the thing becomes so popular, people pound the table for more, and then we give it to them at that point, right? And that's okay. That's it, rather than try to build, if we build it, they will come thing. So
Yeah. It's finding the right balance of what is the first GA
yeah,
experience that is going to be a good experience, but is not going to give too much to overcomplicate it, but not give enough that it's not usable. And yeah, I think we're still trying to figure that out.
if for what it's worth, the ones I've seen, they don't do a lot of this stuff. They threw up their hands and said define it everywhere. Uh, so we may end up doing the same.
But yeah,
All
overall it
right.
looks great. I love the way you presented this too. It was super clear. And from like a configuration settings standpoint, it's following a lot of kind of even the patterns, even though this is still low fidelity that I've seen. I think there's some kind of architecture things we have to work through as we get closer, but that's still further down the line once we get it a bit more fleshed out.
All right. To make sure we have some time to wrap up,
Mhm.
there are a few other questions that I added to the agenda, Andrew, for you to review. But I wanted to make sure to wrap up. I feel like we have a good sense of not only what you shared, so the presentation and the way you shared it resonated with, I believe, everyone. I don't know if anyone had any like concerns other like that discussion we had about nodes, but it's and also like the tools and workflows, but overall, it's a very good direction. It aligns with what people immediately think. For example, Emily here, she didn't look a lot into this space, but immediately these concepts made sense to her as overall. So I think that's a great thing here. Anything else you like to point out as something interesting and valuable that you took from this discussion?
Uh, and I'd like to point, yeah, this is good to hear. It's good to hear that at least at face value, it's not super confusing. Um, we'll continue to see if that holds up as we talk to more people. And particularly if I have to flip the table over and come up with a new model today, we'll see. Which then I might be starting over again, but that's fine. And then yeah, thinking about during this conversation too, just thinking about the community aspects and also the Pedro, your note about the like thinking all the way down to variants and stuff. Like, yeah, where do we draw the line? Is gonna be a thing I have to think about. Like, where do we draw the line on abandoning people and they just have to do a lot of typing work versus trying to make things easy? Or do we punt entirely and everyone just has to define everything in a YAML file over and over again? I don't know.
All right. Yeah, Erica, you can add that to the parking lot above so that Andrew can look at that later. And yeah, I think that's it in the last 30 seconds. Any next steps, Andrew? Anything that you would like for us to follow up on with you, or that you would like to then bring to the group, either async in Slack or an
Mhm.
issue or
I believe there's a high likelihood I'll need to do this again shortly. Like say within a week, I'd say.
Okay.
If there's this other idea that Roger's got, and apparently other folks too, he's just the prophet, right? I don't hear coming from on high, but like I the this other idea of like agents are taskers and like they're like specific to. it's a totally different way of what I've been thinking. So I got to rewrap my brain around this. Like I was thinking like an agent's like a person, and a person can do all kinds of tasks. They have a specialty. And he's like, no, an agent does this task. And like that sounded like that's my old definition of workflow. And then I got to figure out what that means in the world. And do workflows even exist, or do we get rid of them? Do tools exist? He wants to get rid of tools, and I don't see how that works. So I gotta navigate all that. But yeah, once I have a thing that at least makes sense to me, I can then see if it makes sense to everybody else.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to create the agenda for next week's critique, which I won't be here to facilitate. So I will, yeah, if anyone else wants to take that on and start facilitating the next one, or actually, I think Sam had volunteered to be one of the
Oh, great.
first to
Yeah.
facilitate. So I'll suggest that. But anyway, Andrew, if you want to also use this time next week to go over what might be potentially a new model to think about this, feel free to do that. And yeah,
Yeah, that'd be
awesome
good. Yeah,
stuff.
it's as much. I'm definitely looking to get things, but I'm also trying to share to everybody else. Like, Eric is here. It's good because I can imagine this becoming a research thing pretty shortly. If we end up if we end up having like factions battling over which definition of agent we should use, then yeah, we might need to settle that.
I think at the end of oh my gosh, I don't even know what week it is. At the end of this week, we'll have a bunch more agents that people created. And I think they're mapping to personas, but we'll see.
Yeah.
That can help us.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Andrew, I hope also
Thanks
what
everyone
the
for your time. I
agenda
appreciate it.
is
It's a big
helpful for
chunk.
you. And yeah, thank you, everyone. This was really good. I hope this was helpful for everyone. It was for me. I'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Go team!
Thanks.
Go team. Bye-bye.